Real engravings of the 18th century can reveal hidden details of a past civilization. You can find really amazing things that do not fit into the framework of traditional history at all. There is only one big enough problem with studying engravings. Most of the images that are on the web have either been censored or are available in very low resolution, at which very important nuances are not visible. I was lucky to find a website containing hundreds of engravings just in excellent resolution, where the exaggeration of the image shows every small and seemingly meaningless detail. But these so-called trifles can completely change our understanding of the religious movements that existed in the 18th century. These engravings make us take a fresh look at our world and find the remnants of hidden technologies. So, let's get started. I found the warehouse of the engraving of maps of the 18th century through the Stolen History Forum. I constantly praise this site as it is the best forum on alternative history. It was recently blocked for several months, and a huge part of the information is now lost. Recently, the forum was restored. There is not as much information there now as before, but there are very unique things. Link to the new history column in the description. Let's start with this 18th century engraving. At first glance, we see an ordinary Catholic cathedral, and there is even a Catholic cross over the entrance. But, if we zoom in and climb up to the spire of the building, we won't find any more crosses. There are some balls on these spires. And even higher, we see something similar to a weather vane, sitting on it like a bird. And yet, pay attention to the clock. We will constantly meet them on similar buildings. The next engraving, it is not clear what it is, but there is a clock on the turret and a ball with a pike on top. Here are some more interesting buildings. On the left, there is a bell tower with two types of clocks. It seems to have a cross on it, but it is quite unusual in shape. The top of the bell tower is decorated with a man, either with a pineapple or with a cone. The building on the right is no less interesting. There are no crosses on the spires, there are balls, as in modern churches, only in our time, crosses are installed on these balls. And here there are just balls, and a huge bump in the center. View of the old town. We are trying to enlarge and find a classic cross. It's even signed St. Mary's Church. We see not quite a cross, but a bird on top. If you think it's a rooster, you're wrong. I'll show you this creature a little later today, to put it mildly. There is another church with a bird nearby. And only the lowest church is possibly decorated with a cross. Now let's look at the castle. There are only balls with a pike on the spires. The monogram on the right is interesting. Three knights' heads are decorated with symbols of power, a wheel, a papal tiara, and a pineapple. Or something similar and very important, since it is on a par with the tiara. But here we have Malta in all its glory. If we zoom in, we won't see a single Catholic cross. Only on the left, we see something similar to a minaret. One might think that Islam was practiced in Malta, but it is not so. According to the official version, in 1565 year, the islands were transferred to the Order of St. John. And for 2 centuries, the Catholic order strengthened and rebuilt Malta as an outpost for the Crusades. In other words, this is the very heart of Catholicism, and there are no crosses at all on the 18th century engraving. In 1798, Malta was occupied by the French, and they were also Christians. So this is a very revealing engraving. A Christian outpost without crosses. And here we have a project of St. Mary's Church. There are already crosses here, but there is also a bird on the spire. A street of a European city. There is a cross on the dome, but there is a statue of an elephant at the bottom right. The building on the left is decorated with unusual animals. I don't read out what kind of city it is. I'll leave a link to Yandex Dist. From there, you can download it all and take a close look. A completely European audience and such strange sculptures. 1779th year. St. Mary's Church. There are no crosses, just a weather vane. And this looks like a view of Messina. I could be wrong, very illegible. But if this is Messina, then it is in Catholic Italy. The star bastions are clearly visible, but there are no crosses on the temples. But this mural is just a quest for observation. It seems to be an ordinary biblical picture. On top of the angels, God the Father with a ball in his hand. Just below Jesus, next to the holy apostles. By the way, pay attention to this inscription. Probably, this is an old Jewish letter, but there may be a similarity with the Permian letter. On the left, a man in a crown holds something similar to a psaltery. We descend lower, we see high-ranking priests. Many have tiaras. In general, there are a lot of Christians. And most importantly, there are about 30 deeply believing Christians depicted here. But for them, only one cross is depicted for all of them, and it is located on the staff of the man sitting next to Jesus. The cross is not depicted anywhere else. Neither the saints in the middle row have it, nor the priests at the bottom. He is not on the papal tiaras. All these people gathered around some mystical object. A strange engraving. It seems to be a Christian plot, but practically without the image of the main symbol of Christianity, the cross. And this is Dublin. It seems to be a normal view, but the lower strengthening of the rock raises questions. Like curved stone beams. Somehow this house does not fit well with the lower capital structure. Here are some more interesting ruins. What destroyed this stone city? Small ships and such majestic ruins look very strange. And so we got to London. In the foreground, there is a very remarkable tower with a ball at the top. If you zoom in, almost all the buildings are decorated with either flags or weather vanes. At number 32, we see a classic minaret. But it is signed as a monument. A very strange monumental minaret in London. Building number 39. Decorated with something similar to a bird. And this is St. Mary's Church. The whole of London is decorated with either weather vanes or birds. Here, for example, is building 57, 58, 59. At first glance, the classic bell towers, and if you do not increase, you might think that these are crosses. But exaggeration shows that the left part of this cross is larger than the right one, as in the Fruger. Number 57 is St. Clement. 58 is a new church, some kind of trend. I think the British will correct me. 59 St. Martin's. In other words, these are all churches, but they are decorated not with crosses, but with weather vanes. Look at building 50 and 51. The same weather vanes. And this is St. Sepulchre's and St. Martin. I found only one cross in all of London, on St. Paul's Cathedral, building number 48. This is an engraving of 1730th year, and there is only one cross for the whole of London. This fact already raises many questions about the real history of Christianity. Here is another interesting construction of England. At the entrance, there are 2 Egyptian steles and a weather vane on the turret. Here's another structure. There is a large clock at the entrance, and as usual, a weather vane on the spire. The project of the church in Calcutta. What do we have on the spire? Of course, the main symbol of Christianity is a weather vane. Well, not only abroad churches were decorated with weather vanes and other strange signs. Here's a look at Peterhof. There are some rather unorthodox crosses on this church. The church on the right is also not decorated with crosses. Let's go back to the church on the left. Nowadays it looks like this. Pronounced Orthodox crosses. And even in the 20s, she looked the same. But we do not see such crosses on a 19th century engraving. When was Russia baptized? In the 19th century or in the 20th? This is England again, and the church is decorated with a weather vane. There are no signs at all in the derby. Brussels seems to have crosses, but a bird is sitting on them. And there is another strange decoration here. Here is an almost spherical onion with windows. Quite an unusual thing. I will make a video about it in the future. And this seems to be London. I wonder if this is the tower. Quite an unusual shape. And on all the churches, we see the weather vane again. The quality is certainly not very good, but the left jumper is definitely longer than the right one. And it's not a Catholic cross. The Church of Spalding. There are no crosses, there is a bird on the spire. St. Anne's Church. There are no crosses. There is a big ball on top, and there is a weather vane on it. Manchester. All of its churches are also decorated with a weather vane. And this is a plan of Manchester, where there is an image of churches on the sides. The Church of the Holy Trinity with a bird instead of a cross. St. Anne's with the Liverpool Luger. It seems to be a religious building in front of us, but there is only a clock and a weather vane. There is a complete feeling that the British worshipped the weather vane. Royal Street. And again we see the weather vane. View of London, and here we can take a closer look at this strange tower. Decorate her balloon. The shape of the windows is also interesting. A very strange design of incomprehensible purpose. Lincoln Cathedral. There is one cross. And as usual, a weather vane. Another industrial English landscape. An interesting smoking pyramid. But, here, we have Moscow 1799th year. If someone didn't understand, this is what Red Square looked like before the arrival of Napoleon. Here, I am surprised by the surrealism of what is happening. On one side, there are beautiful large buildings with columns and enfilades. But the space between these buildings is covered with piles of sand or clay. The remains of blocks are lying around. Some strange people are selling something right on the ground. On the right, they arranged a canopy made of fabric, put some kind of table, the audience of the European kind. And there are also in Russian costumes. Really, the people who built such buildings could not level the area between them. It's very strange. A number of unusual-looking lanterns stand out from the general mess. Milled columns stand on mounds of sand and do not fit into this picture at all. As if these things were left over from a past civilization. And this is Petersburg again. It seems to be a normal view. On the left, behind the Hermitage building, probably the third version, we see the domes of the temple with crosses. If we zoom in, we will see not classical Orthodox, but slightly different crosses. Something similar has been preserved in the palaces of Venice. These are the piles of balls. Let's go further, and right along the fairway of the Neva, we see another temple. If you zoom in, it looks more like a weather vane than a cross. If you look at the right bank, you will see wooden bridges for mooring ships. These bridges show very well the level of the bank relative to the Neva. The difference is less than a meter, and the question immediately arises, how could huge buildings be built on such a low bank? Neva rises quite often, and even with a heavy downpour, the basements of houses will be flooded. People seem to already know about this, and therefore the stairs to the house were built immediately to the second floor. It seems that the first one is simply impossible to operate due to constant flooding. In these engravings, the illogic of building such buildings on a low bank, and even with windows almost to the ground, is very clearly visible. Here is another very interesting view. Although the artist depicted temples, it is not at all clear whether there are crosses or weather vanes there. The remains of the Admiralty's Star Fortress, and these preserved gates of the Star Bastion, are more interesting here. The same gate has been preserved on the other side of the Admiralty. They stand very illogically, as if they were previously built into the wall. And just recently, this wall was dismantled. Another interesting view of this house. It seems to be the 18th century, but the roof is covered with sheet iron and has a very old look. There is a pile of soil on the Neva side, as if they were trying to protect the house from floods. The whole view of the house is as if it has recently emerged from under the water. And this is a view of the other corner of the Admiralty. On the earthen bastion, there are the same lonely stone gates, as if the walls around them were dismantled. A gate without a wall doesn't make any sense. And this is the second meaningless gate near the Admiralty. And this is Holland. This cathedral looks like some kind of workshop. There are clocks on the turrets, and the rudiments of some crosses. Here's another interesting picture. There are crosses on the temple. They don't look like Catholic. There's a bird on top. Peter and Paul Fortress. Look at the cross on the temple. Prospect of State Colleges in St. Petersburg. Many copies have been made of this engraving, but it is this one that Makeva's apprentice made, in very good quality, and without late additions. Here it is worth paying attention to the water level in the canal. The buildings are built almost at the same level with the water, and they will be constantly flooded. Also interesting are the remains of an incomprehensible structure, around which people crowd. And this picture can be called a pop-up city. There are sandbanks everywhere, scattered boards, and processed stones. About this building, you might think that it is being built. But it looks more like an unfinished building covered with sand. And, even if we assume that construction is underway, where are all the workers? After all, such a structure cannot be built by a team of 7 people who are messing around with abandoned blocks. Moreover, nearby another brigade is trying to take away an abandoned block on a cart. It is trying to lead away. If she had brought him, I think the horses would have looked the other way and unloaded closer to the building. But the most interesting thing in this picture is the flag of the Peter and Paul Fortress. A white cross on a red background. In my opinion, this is the flag of Switzerland. Who thinks what about this? Write in the comments. Maybe I was wrong, and this is the flag of Russia. Here is another simply wonderful engraving. View of the engineering castle. First of all, there is a very interesting temple on the left. I do not know what it is called, but if we zoom in, we will see 3 weather vanes, like on the churches of England. And now, if we go down to the lower right corner, we will see traces of a sharp rise of the Neva for several meters. And this is not a short-term flood, this is a long-term rise for several years. Look at these little houses here. They are built in water. But nobody builds like that. So, the level was not you when you built these houses, was much lower. You might think that the artist sketched the flood, but this is also not true. The embankment of the engineering castle is not flooded at all. So these small houses speak of a sharp change in the level of the world ocean by several meters. The other engravings that I showed you earlier say the same thing. Collegium Avenue. There used to be a deep channel here too. The water rose to the top of the canal, that is to the level of the building. And in this engraving, these buildings were also built at a stable lower level of the navel. The level rose, and they had to be sprinkled with sand. Now we are going to look at another Dutch city. And again, there are incomprehensible constructions everywhere instead of crosses. Here is another unusual church. There is a clock. There seems to be a cross, but the cross is decorated with a bird. And here's what kind of bird it is, I'm going to show you now. To do this, let's take this engraving. On it we see a temple and an interesting stele. The temple seems to have a cross, but the cross is not quite ordinary. And on top of the stela, a seemingly ordinary rooster is sitting on a ball. But if you zoom in, then this rooster has a very strange head, somewhat similar to a dog's. It is unclear what was believed in the 18th century, and what was the main religion, but definitely not Christianity. Churches in England, Holland and Russia were decorated with weather vanes and birds with a dog's head. There are even more interesting creatures. Look at this fountain. There don't seem to be any secrets here. Pineapple as usual. But if we increase the coat of arms in the lower right corner, we will see an absolutely incredible picture. Are these aliens? Intelligent insects? What does that even mean? That's it. Watch my channel.